Hey guys, welcome to the best move number 73. This position is black to move, and black played the move pawn to e5. And our prompt in this particular case is should black have played e5 or not? And we should provide variations to support. To be honest, the way the prompt phrases the question, it's really asking us is e5 good or refutable? So we're not really that interested in other white moves. I'm not going to be looking for other black moves, other superior black moves. I'm just going to be looking to see if I can bust this move pawn to e5 with black to play. So after e5, we have pawn captures on e5. We have knight captures on e5. We also have pawn to d5 as options. Those appeal to me pretty strongly. Some other observations are that after e5, I'm a little worried about the fact that white's bishop on c4 is lining up on f7, so I'm wondering about knight g5. So maybe knight g5 is a candidate move. There's also bishop g5. Let's see. Those seem to be my prime candidate moves. Captures on e5, knight g5, and pawn to d5. I have to say that my initial reaction is black should not have played e5. Black just doesn't seem sufficiently well developed. Black doesn't seem sufficiently in command of the center to be able to play e5. Instinctively, I like pawn to d5 for white without even considering the other tactical refutations. But let's start getting into some tactics and some variations. Let's see if white can play, for instance, knight g5, which is my first candidate move. So we have pawn to e5, we have knight to g5. Knight g5 immediately threatens to capture on f7 with either the knight or the bishop. Capturing with the knight seems more dangerous because we'd be threatening a host of discovered checks if the knight moves, and we'd also be threatening the rook on d8. That seems incredibly effective. However, after e5, knight g5, of course, it's black's move. So black could play capturing on d4. Pawn captures on d4 when admittedly his queen is lined up with our queen. There's not an objective pin on the bishop on e3 because our queen on e2 would be defended. So we're not losing the bishop, but black has actually a fork on d4. Things seem really problematic. So e5, knight g5, pawn captures d4 for black. White would need to play knight take f7. Otherwise, I believe he's just getting busted. So e5, knight g5, knight take f7. Knight g5, pawn takes d4, knight take f7. And then what? Then what? What about bishop e6 for black there? So after knight takes f7, black plays bishop e6. Now white can take on d8, and black would probably play rook takes d8. And in that position, black is retaining the fork on the bishop on e3 and the knight on c3. It looks to me like black is getting two pieces for the rook and the pawn, and black has completed development. And I don't immediately see a tactical refutation, because although the bishop on e6 is loose, if white captures on d4, then knight captures d4 would hit the queen on e2, and would defend e6. But maybe white doesn't need to capture on d4 even though he's forked. Maybe white could play a move like bishop g5. And now I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable. So the line I have now, which I think I probably have like 5 mistakes in here, is e5, knight g5, pawn captures on d4, knight take f7, bishop e6, bishop e6, knight takes d8, rook takes d8, and I'm thinking of moving the bishop on e3, but if I move the bishop on e3, bishop g5, white is threatening to capture on e6. Keep in mind, at this point, that white is up material. He's grabbed a rook on d8 and a pawn on f7 for a pawn on d4 and the knight that got recaptured. So white is up material, and there's not enough time for black to grab the knight on c3. If he grabs the knight on c3, white loses. White grabs the bishop on e6. So this is looking correct and winning for white. e5, knight g5. Pawn captures d4. Knight captures f7. Bishop e6. Knight captures d8. Rook captures d8. Bishop g5. Wins for white. Are there any alternatives along the way? So after e5, if white plays knight g5, you could play bishop e6 for black, but simply knight captures e6, pawn captures e6 would leave white with a great target. White would be positionally killing it. I don't know if he is objectively winning it, but black can't be happy with that. After e5, knight g5, bishop e6 is the only appealing move I see to defend f8. You could play rook f8, but that feels like a major concession to me from black's point of view. And good things should come about afterwards for white. e5, knight g5, pawn captures d4. Instead of pawn captures d4, you could play knight captures d4, but that's less threatening. So for instance, white could now play bishop takes f7 check, and I think white would be doing really well. So pawn captures d4, knight takes f7. Here it would seem like black has more choices. Bishop e6 shouldn't be the only move. Black is retaining the fork, but I'm very uncomfortable because the rook is under attack with a discovered check. So with the knight capturing on f7, there's a big threat to pick up a free rook with knight takes d8, discovered check. So I guess you could play a move like rook e8. Maybe rook f8 and allow the discovered check. It feels horrible to me to just take a move out and allow a big check like that. E5, knight g5, pawn takes d4, rook, knight take f7, rook f8. But what does white do? I think that what white does is simply play knight d8 check or knight e5 check, takes the knight on c6 because the rook that was on d8 has moved to f8. The only piece defending that pawn on d4 is the knight on c6. So if we eliminate the knight on c6, we should be able to just take the pawn on d4, and we've got a crushing position. So I don't think you can move the rook successfully in response to knight takes f7. You could play king f8, you're just allowing knight takes d8. Everything just seems bad, bad, bad. So after knight take f7, all I see is bishop e6. Then you have knight takes d8. I guess black could play something besides rook takes d8, but I would think every other recapture is worse. It seems like you got to play rook a takes d8. Nothing else appeals for logical and tactical reasons. Queen takes is walking into pins with the rook coming to the d file. Knight takes d8 removes the defender of the d4 pawn. This is just grotesque, grotesque, grotesque. So rook takes d8, but I think then bishop g5 keeps all the material and white wins. So I think e5, knight g5 busts it. I don't know about the other moves. It looks like d takes e5 is really, really strong to me. It looks like d5 is also strong to me. I didn't even get there because knight g5 looks like a bust for black. But d5 also looks good. The captures on e5, I think, let black off the hook. Pawn captures e5, knight captures e5. I don't see any refutation of black's setup, and so you're liquidating pawns and allowing black to free the bishop on c8 without any immediate repercussions. So e5 seems to me to be a bust after knight g5 because of all these crazy lines that I am sure I have miscalculated. Well, as you can see, I'm not even close on this one. Not even in the right ballpark. Calculated some lines accurately, missed a lot of stuff. Really need to work on my calculation. And I didn't even give mild consideration to the winning move. The winning move is very simply pawn takes. You trade everything off on e5, and then bishop takes f7 check allows you a very nice fork. Queen takes b4 coming, and you're just a totally clean pawn up with nothing really as compensation for black. So that's really pretty straightforward, and I was so caught up in looking at knight g5 that I didn't really consider this, which is kind of silly. The instinct is that e5 is premature, and there are other ways to take advantage of a premature move besides just knight g5, so this should have been more seriously considered. And this tactic is really pretty classic. It comes up a lot in the Evans Gambit, for instance, and other major e4, e5 openings. So it's one that should jump off the page to strong players like white in this game, who did find this pretty quickly, evidently. There are some really interesting lines after e5, knight g5. So e5, knight g5. The problem is, yes, e takes d4 is dangerous for black. Black has a saving line after e takes d4, but I didn't give enough consideration to bishop g4 because I thought that basically black had to defend f7. A really good rule that I try to teach my students is when your opponent is making a threat, ask yourself if you can ignore it. And here black can ignore it and play the move, of course, he wants to play. He definitely wants to develop the bishop, and he wants that's the entire point of e5, is to get the bishop on c8 out into the game. Not the entire point, but much of the point is to get the bishop into the game. And now if bishop takes f7 check, black can even play king h8, but even simpler is that he could throw in queen takes f7. So because white's own queen is hanging on e2, white doesn't really even have a threat to take on f7. So everything is fine for black after bishop g4. If black goes along and plays e takes d4, then we have some more complicated stuff. We do have knight takes f7, and here the line that I calculated is basically correct, but I've missed two saving resources along the way for black. I missed that black could immediately meet knight g5 with bishop g4, save the bacon, black has no problems. By the way, if white defends the queen on e2 after bishop g4, black can just retreat bishop h5. He's developed the bishop, f7 is covered. Black has no problems anymore. Here, white is threatening the rook on d8. The line that I calculated, my main line was accurate. If bishop e6, which is a candidate move, knight takes, rook takes, bishop g5 for a start is winning for white. Not totally over, but white should emerge and carry the day in these lines. If, however, black does not play bishop e6, but black plays rook d7, only move, then white doesn't really have a great way to take advantage. The most natural thing, and the reason I didn't really think about rook d7, is for white to discover a check, allow the king to move, and grab on d7. But then black develops the bishop, the rook is coming over, and black has managed to retain the pawn fork, and so black will get two pieces for the rook and a pawn in the end, and black's actually doing really, really well there. The two pieces are classically superior to the rook and the pawn in the middle game, so great day for black. All of these calculations are wrong. Basically, white wins a pawn by trading on e5 and taking on f7. So many, many misses. Hopefully your calculations were at least slightly more accurate than mine in this variation.